I'm joined today by Henry Shapiro, co-founder of Reclaim, who's going to be walking through Reclaim. We're doing a bit of an introductory session today, walking through all the smart features, taking a look at something very exciting coming soon to Reclaim, our newest improvement that the team has been working on. Henry, I'll pass it over to you. Take it away.
Thanks so much. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. As Elizabeth mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of Reclaim. Super excited to show off Reclaim to all of you. Some of you joining may be brand new to the product. Some of you may have been using it for a while. The goal of today, really, as Elizabeth mentioned, is to kind of go through what we think of as kind of the core features of Reclaim. We'll show you some best practices around how to get the most out of the product. And then actually, before I do that, I'm going to do a little bit of a roundup of what's new in the product. Since our last webinar, as Elizabeth mentioned, we've got some really cool stuff that's out there that's available for you right now. We've got some stuff that's in beta that's coming really soon. And I want to show that all to you today. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And assuming y'all can see that, let's start with probably the first thing that you'll notice on this left-hand side. If you are an avid Reclaim user or you're used to seeing your nav, you probably noticed this nav has changed a little bit. We now have what we think of as kind of the core sections of our product kind of broken up into a couple different areas. We have time blocking and meetings. The other areas haven't really changed that much. You can collapse these and it's nice and condensed. But more than anything, the purpose of this nav redesign was really to help. Reclaim has a lot going on. As you've probably noticed, there's a lot of power in the product. There's a lot of pieces you can put together to manage your calendar, a lot of different entry points. And so we really wanted to help people sort of clarify, what the main purpose of the product is. And we think of that really as time for heads down work, which we are calling time blocking here, and time for meetings, which are things like smart meetings and scheduling links. But then in addition to the nav redesign was not just because we wanted to redesign the nav. It's also because we are working on a brand new feature that we are calling Focus. This is in beta. We've got a bunch of folks using it. If you are interested in joining the beta, we are happily taking on new participants. This is something that we're going to be trying to roll out to everybody in the coming weeks and months. Focus is really, I'll back up a little bit and explain kind of like the story here. We started, Reclaim a long time ago and initially launched a feature called Habits. And the funny story is, actually, originally Habits weren't even called Habits. If you go on Product Hunt and you look up a thing called Lunch Buddy, or you look up, I forget what we called it, Reclaim Assistant, I think is what we called it at the time. We initially launched Habits as just like a way to make time for lunch. They weren't even like customizable. It was just like the flexible Habits platform, but with like hard-coded policies for lunch and email. And we really wanted to sort of test out this idea of flexible, adaptive time for your routines. And then obviously Habits has developed into this really big platform. You've got, all these different templates and ways you can modify your habits. You can create time for any routine that's on your calendar. We have the same kind of power within tasks, lots of integrations, the ways, basically ways to pull in your task list. But one thing we were hearing from a lot of our customers was like, sometimes people aren't ready to be that intentional with their time. We have a strong opinion that you should be really intentional with your time and where your time goes. But some people really just kind of want like the easy button. They want to be able to say like, I want to just like create space on the calendar. I don't really have a plan for what I'm going to do at that time until I get there. And I just want like a way for Reclaim to just block out my calendar for the week. And there's a whole bunch of different ways we're going to be thinking about this problem. But the first kind of simplest way that we're thinking about it is what we are calling sort of fill the balloon, and the balloon being your calendar, or at least all the available and empty space on your calendar. So the first kind of part of it is you're kind of giving us a goal of how much time per week you want to get for Focus. This goal can be modified at any time. I can use this slider just to kind of update what I like. And then additionally, I can change which hours I have this focus time scheduling during. This also includes any custom hours that I've created. I'll show you hours when we get into tasks and habits in just a bit. But these are sort of like, Do you want to have focus time in the mornings? Do you want to have it in the evenings? Do you want to have it on certain days but not others? Um, and then you're really giving us just a couple of other simple preferences. How many hours do you want per week? What's the max amount of time that you want to get per day? And then kind of what's like the chunk size? Like, do you want us to do like an hour per day? Do you want us to do like 8 hours, or sorry, 1 hour at a time, no less than 1 hour at a time, no more than 8 hours a time? One of the things we're still trying to kind of work through are different types of preferences and presets. So, we've gotten lots of feedback already about people who are like, well, I really want focus time to prefer scheduling in the morning, but I don't want to have to like constrain my hours to that. Some folks are like, I really want to make sure I optimize for like uninterrupted time versus kind of breaking it up on the calendar. So there's still lots of work to be done here. But what we've built so far is already pretty darn useful. We have some nice little stats here. We're showing you kind of how your time was broken down across this week and last week. So we show you kind of your focus time versus meetings. We show you kind of the trend line and what your most and least productive days are. You can see a lot of this same data in our stats screen. We're sort of experimenting with different metrics we might want to show here, and then those may make their way into stats. They may not. We're still trying to kind of work through that whole discussion. The other thing to bear in mind is that focus time, if you're already using habits and tasks, your existing work habits and tasks will count towards your focus time goal. And actually, because this account has a lot of habits on it, when I go to the calendar, we may not actually see any focus time blocked out, which would be kind of a lame demo. But part of the reason for that is that we're already counting some of your existing solo work events and some of your existing, excuse me, habits and tasks as available kind of focus time. In fact, maybe I'll actually disable my focus time habit here. This is what some people have been using this feature for, is actually to create focus time. Sorry, I'm just going to disable this, not delete it. And maybe we'll disable catch up as well. And we'll see if this kind of shakes things loose. But really, the goal of this is to give you kind of an easy on-ramp into the product, make it really simple for you to block out time on your calendar without having to necessarily know exactly what you want to use that time for. The other really cool thing about focus time is that just like everything in the product, it's sort of aligned and mapped to priorities. So you don't literally take focus time and drag it into priorities. We sort of felt like that was a little bit of a weird experience. Instead, what we do, and we may make this configurable in the future, is we allow for critical scheduling links, which are high priority, basically the highest priority scheduling links, to overbook focus time. So we still want to make it so that focus time doesn't make you totally unavailable for meetings. Similarly, we want to make sure that if you have specific habits or you have specific tasks or smart meetings, we want to make sure those get scheduled before we lay down your focus time. So we're trying to kind of be sensitive to the other stuff that's on your calendar. And right now we're only booking this about 3 weeks out. So that's kind of where you'll see it kind of book out to. And I'm still not seeing my focus time events come in, but hopefully in just a moment here, we'll see it come in. Let's check next week and see if we've got a little bit coming in here. There we go. We've got at least 1 and 2 over here. So there's a couple other neat things to point out here. One is that focus time is actually using the native focus time event in Google Calendar. We really want to lean into existing platforms wherever we can, existing patterns. If this is something you're already using inside of Google, this is automating that process for you. You can change this description text and kind of modify the emoji if you want to add an emoji to it. And then, of course, you can add and modify these things like automatically decline meetings or do not disturb if you're one of the few organizations that uses Google Chat, although you should really use Slack status sync for this because most people use either Slack or Teams. And eventually, again, those configuration options may make their way into our UI as well. So this is very early. This is the product of, maybe about a few weeks worth of work. So we're a team that moves pretty quickly. I think you're going to see this experience change quite a bit. I was actually on vacation for a couple of weeks, and this thing looked completely different when I left. So we're making some really great progress on it. Definitely reach out if you're interested in the beta. You can reach out to support, or you can pop a question into this webinar, and we can follow up with you there. So that's Focus. Really excited to bring it to you. Before I dive into some of the other time blocking features here, I wanted to talk about a couple of cool improvements that have come out for scheduling links. And then I'll talk a little bit about the Outlook beta that is ramping up very quickly. I mean, I'm guessing a lot of the people on this call may not care because maybe you're already using Reclaim with Google, but if you have an Outlook work calendar, or if you're have some friends who are in Outlook, feel free to let them know. Um, so first on scheduling links, there's a couple of new things here to note. The first is for a very long time in features like smart meetings, you've been able to add and invite anyone to a smart meeting, even if they're not a Reclaim user. There are some caveats to that. We have to be able to see their availability. And if you're inside a workspace, that's usually pretty easy. If they're outside the workspace, you have to do something like share your calendar with them, or of course, they can sign up for Reclaim. That's always preferable. But we, for a variety of reasons, limited this on scheduling links. We made it kind of like basically someone had to be in your team in order to be added to a scheduling link. And so we still want to make it easier for you to add in team members. But now, in addition to that, you can just enter in an email for anyone that you want to add into a scheduling link. And just like smart meetings, if we're able to see their calendar information, so if this is someone who's inside your workspace in Google, or if this is someone you've shared your calendar with, or that rather they've shared their calendar with you, we'll be able to see their availability and be added. They'll be added to the scheduling link. So I could do Bob at example.com. It's not a real person. Turns out example.com is actually a fake domain. If you ever want to try out things, example.com is your friend. There is no example.com, so you're not going to end up emailing someone named Bob at example.com. You can see here we're alerting you to the fact that Bob pretty much doesn't exist. And we give you these little options, just like with smart meetings, where we can kind of give you little prompts to help you make sure that those scheduling links get scheduled properly. And then I can also kind of pick the hours for those folks once I have their calendar information added. And yeah, so that's pretty much optional, what we call non-member scheduling link attendees or co-organizers. You can do this in our team scheduling links. These are like scheduling links that are looking across everyone's availability. And then you can also do them in round robin links. So I can have like a link where, Bob is one person and maybe Angela and Creed and Jim. I've got all these people here and I want to, throw them into my round robin pool. And I can have them, basically be pulled through. So this is a really nice improvement. It makes it just easier for you to adopt scheduling links and use it with other people in your team, even if they're not in your Reclaim team. There's lots of other good reasons to add people into your Reclaim team, but we want to really make it simple for you to, make sure that you can get those links scheduled. So that's pretty exciting. The other thing I wanted to show off is very recent. This came out in the last week or two, or last couple of weeks. It's still going through a little bit of polish, so there's some little improvements we want to make here. But we've had these custom questions available for quite some time, where you can add different types of screening information for your attendees to answer before they book a meeting. And for a long time, this question was pretty much like an open-ended text question. Like you would say, like, here's my question, and someone would give you an answer in text. What we heard from a lot of folks was that they wanted to be able to add other types of questions, things like drop downs or radio buttons, or they wanted to have specific fields that had validation for things like phone number or email. And so now you can do things like, what are you looking for? And I can add options like, I want a demo. I need help, something else. I can make this required, of course, if I'd like, which I may do here. And then once I save this, I can actually take that link. I think this is the same link that I used. And I can start to check out here. And you can see I've got this, little drop down here, and all this information goes into the description of the event when the event gets booked. And then in addition to that, if you use our webhook APIs, where you can basically webhook services, where you can basically send over this data to other platforms like HubSpot or Salesforce, that information, the custom questions, will show up in that webhook payload. So you can use this to populate like CRMs or spreadsheets or other kinds of things. So some really cool stuff to point out on scheduling links. Pretty excited to share that with you. The last couple new things, these are sort of new-ish things, and this is actually probably a good segue into habits and tasks, which I'll start with, and then before I go too much further, I'll answer a couple questions. The first is the ability to share your habits. We have had templates in the product for a long time. You can pick from existing habits for inspiration. These are organized by department. In addition to that, you can create templates that you can share within your team. So you can do things like, I want to make sure that my team always has focus time or catch up. These are sort of like suggestions that people will get during onboarding if they sign up and join your team, or things that you want to kind of suggest to people once they're in the product. If you're an admin on the team, you can create more of these templates. But one thing that we realized was missing was that it was really hard to actually like share these routines with people outside of your team, right? It's that same kind of theme of scheduling links where like we didn't want to just like lock you into being inside the team. We wanted to make it really, really easy for you to share all these routines that you're adding into your calendar with other folks. So if you're in Slack, or you're on a Zoom call with folks, or you're in an all hands, or whatever it might be, and you want to tell people like, hey, here's how I block out lunch, or here's how I get time to exercise, or here's how I make time for my weekly status report. This is a great way to do that. And so you can take any of your existing habits. You get a little link here that you can copy. You can share it on social if you'd like. And then once you copy it and paste it, people will get a nice little preview link that will prompt them to add that habit to their calendar when they sign up. So some nice little stuff there. The last thing I will point out, this one's a little older, but it's a good one nonetheless, is task cooldowns, which are here. So one thing that we've had in the product for a while is this idea of trying to break up your tasks or kind of space out your tasks over time, so that we don't kind of book you for tasks like back to back to back to back. For a long time, this wasn't configurable. It was just sort of a default behavior that was in our backend, and it's now configurable. So if you're the kind of person who does want to do tasks back to back to back, like as soon as possible, you can get rid of it. By default, it's set to an hour. You can also limit it to like once per day if you want to only have tasks scheduled once per day. And then, of course, you get these other presets here. So these are great ways of managing your tasks. I'll talk more about some other pretty cool scheduling preferences that we have for tasks once we get into that. So that I think pretty much covers what's new. Outlook. Last thing I will mention. Reclaim is officially for reals coming very, very soon for Outlook. We have thousands of people now in the beta. We're going to be opening it up to thousands more in the next couple of weeks. Everyone on the internet will be able to sign up for Reclaim with Outlook. And I do mean everyone on the internet. And so we're really excited to get this out there. It's been a long, much longer, candidly, journey than we expected. Turns out calendars are really hard. Turns out Microsoft calendars are somehow even harder. But the really cool thing I'll just show you is you will now be able to, this account's not feature flagged for it. No. Well, I could show you my other account, but I promise we do have Outlook support in the product. There's not much to show here besides the fact that you can add Outlook credentials to the account and set it as your main account. It works with everything in the product, all your calendar syncs and habits and tasks and smart meetings. If you're interested in that beta, please do reach out to us. We have a wait list that's been going with tens of thousands of people on it, and we're hoping to reach out to almost all of those folks in the next week or two. And then, as I mentioned, it'll be opened up on our sign up page very soon. So very excited about that. I'm going to pause there. There's probably, I see a handful of things in the chat. I haven't looked at them yet, but Elizabeth, feel free to read off some questions.
Yeah, we actually have one question from Michael who had to jump for another meeting, but I'd like to follow up with him with a recording too.
Mhm.
On Outlook, said glad Outlook is now available. However, for those who require cross-platform sync, Outlook's app to sync with iOS, iCloud fails repeatedly. This forced many of us to seek out a clone of Outlook called EM Client. Uh, and he's wondering if there's going to be any support for additional sort of cross-sync platforms with this Outlook release.
I think you may have stumped the chump. I would say that's probably a good question. I think we need a little bit more context before I can answer that semi-intelligently. So I think that's a great question to reach out to and support about. I think I kind of get where the question's going, but the word sync is very heavily used in Reclaim. And so I want to make sure I don't know if we're talking about calendar sync or if we're talking about just like iOS apps and it staying up to date with Outlook. That's a huge kind of known problem between iCloud or iOS calendar and other calendars, not just Outlook, but Google as well. But anywho, I would say support is a great place to bring that question.
Perfect. We have another question from Arthur, which we could loop back to at the end of the demo, maybe, but I figure I'd share now. It says, love Reclaim. Love to hear that. One
Love it.
issue I continue to have, I'll give you an example. I have a vacation on my calendar in June, completely blocked
Mm-hmm.
out and marked as busy, but random
Yep.
Reclaim habits and tasks are still appearing in that blocked out week. What's going on?
What's going on, Arthur? I think I know. I think I know. We'll see. I mean, it's possible I don't know, but chances are that vacation is not on a calendar that your tasks and habits are scheduling on, and it's not on a connected calendar in Reclaim. So maybe this is actually a good place. This is a great transition. Actually, I'm sitting on the calendars page right now,
Yeah.
and so I'll do actually, this is a great way to talk about some of the foundations of Reclaim and how to get it in a great spot. So one of the first things that's really important to note about Reclaim is that calendars are complicated, as I mentioned earlier. Uh, Within Google Calendar, maybe I'll start here. This is what is known as your primary calendar. This is the calendar where basically by default, all your events are going to land. It'd be really nice if Google like told you this was your primary. The only way they do it is by putting it at the top of the list. If you didn't know this, you wouldn't know that like your primary calendar is pretty much like the only place by default that events will land. All other calendars here are what are known as secondary or sub calendars. Secondary and sub calendars are basically like they're pretty much just visible to you. So if you're in a workplace, like inside a Google Workspace, most companies will make it possible for you to like see other people's calendars. So I can do things like use this like, find a time feature and add like other people. I can go in and be like, let me go chat with Elizabeth. And now I can see Elizabeth's calendar. Sorry for showing your calendar, Elizabeth. Um, and that's really neat. But I can't see, for example, like if Elizabeth shared like a personal calendar with her work account, or she has like another shared calendar, I'm never going to see any of those events. And so it's important to understand this because one of the big things that Reclaim is actually trying to kind of fill the gap on is this whole point around like cross calendar visibility, right? Not only for what Reclaim needs to schedule, meaning like we need to understand the combination of calendars that consume your availability, but also in terms of what your coworkers see when you're blocking out time for vacation or blocking out time for a doctor's appointment or something like that. And so the very first thing I recommend doing, or one of the very first things you should do when you set up Reclaim, is make sure that all your what we call connected calendars represent sort of the totality of what you would like Reclaim to consider when it is blocking time. So in this case, I only have two calendars that I'm worried about. Most people in the world, some people have like 20 calendars, but most people have like at least a work calendar and a personal calendar. And that's what I've got going here. So within my Reclaim.ai email, I've shared my personal calendar, and this is your primary. You can't disconnect that. That's something Reclaim needs to do its job. we try to do a really good job of saying this is your primary calendar and making it clear to you that it's your primary. And then here, I've actually checked my personal calendar. If I wanted, I could also say, well, these calendars also need to be considered, but I actually don't want these calendars to be considered when Reclaim's blocking time. So this is what Reclaim's going to look at as sort of like my free busy matrix for the calendar. Sorry, this is a long answer to Arthur's question, but it's an important piece of background, I think. So that's the very first thing I would say. So the first potential cause could be that that vacation event is not on a calendar that is in this list of connected calendars. That's the first thing I would check. The other thing to note is that if you want that vacation event to live on another calendar and you don't want it to be a connected calendar for whatever reason, or you want that time to be blocked out for anyone else who's looking at your work calendar, for example, this is a great use for calendar sync. Some people will block out their personal events directly on their work calendar. Like they'll take their doctor's appointment and put it there, but then that creates certain like privacy issues. What calendar sync was designed to do is actually copy events across calendars. So it's a little different than connected calendars. It sounds very similar, but the biggest difference is connected calendars is just saying, hey, what is my availability as far as Reclaim's platform is concerned? Calendar sync is saying, I'm actually going to take events and copy them over to another calendar so that if people are viewing that destination calendar, that work calendar, or whatever calendar you're syncing to, they see that time is available or unavailable. And we give you all sorts of nice little privacy options here. So that's another way that you could deal with this. If you wanted that vacation event to live on a different calendar, you don't want it to be a connected calendar, but you do want that time to get synced over. And you can see here an example of how a doctor's appointment gets synced over. That's my first suspicion. Obviously, if you're still running into issues, would be happy to have you reach out to support. We have a great support team that can totally help you with that challenge. But if you got a vacation event and it's marked busy, typically the only other possibility is that it's just not on a calendar that Reclaim's seeing right now as connected.
I think that's all we have for questions right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I see. Fast tracked, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, cool. Sweet. So let's start with habits, since we were kind of talking a little bit about calendars already. We've kind of talked about how to set up Reclaim to sort of get your basic visibility in place. And we talked about focus earlier, which is sort of this new sort of easy button that we're working on for creating time. But habits, as I mentioned earlier, are really a way to create flexible routines on your calendar. The first really kind of common example, as I mentioned, is lunch. This is the one that, like, if you do nothing else with Reclaim, we highly recommend you get some time to eat every day. What's really cool about habits, instead of them being just normal recurring events on your calendar, is they have a lot more flexibility. So I can tell Reclaim how important this routine is relative to other routines or other events on my calendar. This is this priority field that we have here. I'll talk about that in a second when we get to tasks and kind of talk a little bit more about how these trade-offs are made. I can give it sort of different categories, and Reclaim will automatically color code it based on my settings. I'll show you color coding a little bit later. And then I can also set a set of hours where I want the thing to happen. Now with lunch, I probably don't want to just say like, hey, do it anytime between like, 8 and 6:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. I'll probably end up eating lunch at 7 a.m. or something like that. So chances are I want to do it sometime between 11:30 and 2. Some people are different. I can tell Reclaim how frequently I want to do that thing. We have lots of different frequency cadences here, so you can do monthly or quarterly or every N weeks. Lots of different ways to kind of set up your habits here. I can tell it ideally what time I want to get it done at, and then very importantly, I can give it a minimum and maximum duration. And this is another really powerful lever because, as you know, if you try to just get an hour for lunch at noon every day and it's marked as busy, a lot of the time that stuff's going to get eaten up by meetings. It's going to get moved around. You're going to end up having to move those events around to defend your time. You end up eating at your desk or not eating at all. It's not fun. And so what this duration kind of lever lets you do is Reclaim will sort of dynamically adapt and shift the duration of the event based on how busy your calendar is. Then there's lots of other little features here. I won't go too much further into depth there. And I'll just kind of dive into the calendar, actually show you our planner view here. The planner is sort of like a little calendar interface with lots of specific actions that you can take on pretty much everything in Reclaim. If I click into one of my lunches here, I can get all that same data that's on the habits screen. If I right click here, I have all sorts of options to like skip it for the day or move it to a later time in the day or lock it down if I want it to kind of like stop moving around and stay in place. I can literally move the event to another time if I'd like, and it'll stay in place. One thing you'll notice though is that lunch is sort of threaded throughout the week, right? Like on Tuesday the 18th, it's from 12 to 12:30. On Thursday the 20th, it's from 12:45 to 1:30. On Friday, I've got only 15 minutes because I've got this long engineering meeting that I've got to make time for. And then on Wednesday, Reclaim actually detected that I already have lunch with the team. And so it didn't schedule it that day. And it added some travel time for me automatically because that event had a location. So one thing you're noticing kind of right off the bat is that like lunch is sort of like flexibly scheduling. The other thing you might notice in the planner view, and you can also see this same sort of view if you look at the emojis on the calendar. Here you've got these little free emojis. And you probably have noticed some of these as you've been going through your calendar. These are fully customizable. I'll show you that here in a second. But the whole reason that those emojis or these blank spaces are here is because in addition to kind of blocking that time flexibly throughout the week, Reclaim is automatically sort of toggling the free or busy status on the event because we don't want you to just like block out your whole calendar because that sometimes makes it worse. Like you get more people pinging you and trying to like, get your time because they can't find any time on the calendar. So Reclaim will try to sort of keep that time flexible until your time gets really, really busy. If you really do start to run out of time, like let's say, I got really boxed in here, like someone put a 12 to 1 meeting on my calendar, in a few seconds, what you'll notice is Reclaim's going to automatically reschedule this meeting or this lunch habit. It's going to move it from 1 to 1:30, and it's probably going to get marked as busy because Reclaim's sort of noticing that, hey, you're really running short on time here, and let's make sure that that time doesn't get taken up by someone else. This is very dependent. This sort of free busy behavior is dependent on the priority of the habits. So more critical habits are going to get defended more aggressively. Less critical ones are going to get defended less aggressively. You can also totally opt out of this behavior if you're like, hey, I don't ever want these things to be toggling back and forth using the AI. I want to just say like free or busy, right? Some people want habits to never block out their time. Some people want them to always block out their time. So you can kind of set it using this time defense setting here. So lots of control over habits. Definitely some cool stuff to do there. Would really highly encourage you to set up at least a couple. Some people have dozens of habits. I tend to have like 3 to 5, and then I leave a bunch disabled, and I'll revive them sometimes. Recently I've been doing a bit more recruiting work, and so I'm trying to like ramp up my time on recruiting, and then I kind of fade away on that for a little while and do other stuff. My calendar is a complete mess. So, something about the cobbler's children's shoes or something like that. I know I think there may be one question. I'm just looking at the chat bubble. So Elizabeth, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take them before I move on to tasks and buffers.
I don't think we have any other questions. If you do have questions, we have about 10 minutes left. So drop those in the Q&A so we can answer them. No bad questions and all that. Drop those in. Henry, back to you.
Cool. I got to go lightning fast here. I totally thought we had an hour, and I'm completely wrong. Let's talk about buffers super briefly. Buffers are going to go through a whole bunch of improvements very soon as part of the focus work. This is an area that we really want to make some like great improvements to. Things like, only give me a break after every X hours of meetings, or give me pre-meeting buffers. There's all sorts of great improvements to make here. That stuff I think is right around the corner. As it stands today, it's already pretty useful. You can configure buffers to give you breaks between your tasks and habits. You can configure it to automatically add a preset amount of travel time before and after events. One of the things we really would like to do with travel time is start to add like home and work locations, so you can have different sort of travel times that you're setting for traveling from home versus traveling from work. And then the other is adding breaks after meetings. You can do this for all meetings or after video conference meetings only. Again, just like habits, really easy feature to understand, really easy to get value out of, really highly encourage you to set it up. It's just a great way to create like a little bit of negative space in between your day for like bio breaks and prepping between meetings, taking a little run around the block before you have to go back into the fray. Tasks, lots to talk about with tasks. Like habits, they are all about making time for personal and work, kind of solo time, heads down time. You can create tasks directly within Reclaim. Just like habits, they have a priority that sort of decides how aggressively they're going to get scheduled and in what order they're going to get scheduled. You can set different hours for your tasks. And then you kind of tell us how much time you need to work on something, what the minimum and maximum amount of time you want to spend at a time is. And then very importantly, you want to give us a due date. You don't have to give us a due date. You can have optional due dates, but some people like to put a due date, and that's going to determine just how aggressively we try to get that time and try to get that work done before the due date. The other thing I'll point out on tasks is that we have a ton of integrations that you can use to sync your tasks over from different platforms. So we've got integrations with Google Tasks, with Linear, Todoist, Jira, Asana, ClickUp. Lots of great video content on this stuff, lots of great help docs on it. If you want to get more information about how to use it, we're always here in support. If you're curious about setting up one of these integrations or if you have specific questions about it. The other thing I'll point out about tasks is that one of the things we've learned a lot creating tasks and working on this platform. It's changed a whole bunch over the past few years. Is that there's different styles that people have for working through their tasks. Some people, especially when it comes to them being on the calendar, some people, they really want Reclaim to always assume that the task is done, or at least done scheduling, as soon as time passes over it. So you can see here, like all these tasks that are marked as done scheduling, I can add more time to them. I could be like, hey, I actually need like another hour to work on this. But Reclaim right now assumes that this thing is done because all the time is kind of burned down on it, right? All the duration that I asked for is already passed. But some people have a very different way of looking at the world, and they want to sort of be like, hey, if I don't actually tell you that I've started working on this task, please don't consider it done and actually keep rescheduling it until I tell you it's done, or at least until I tell you I've started it. And this is a preference that you can actually set up here. So I actually have it set up to start manually. You can also have it by default, it will start when tasks are scheduled. So you can see here, you've got this nice little visual that it sort of shows you how that works. You've always got this play button that is basically a start button if you want to start a task early. We show you what's coming up next. This is also a nice little plug for our Raycast extension, or even for our Slack integration, both of which have a lot of these same actions, but you can also get to them here. So until you hit play, if you've got this setting on, your tasks are not going to, we're not going to assume that your tasks are done. We're going to, assume that you still need to tell us that you've started them. I talked about scheduling links quite a bit. The last thing I'll say on scheduling links, we're sort of transitioning into meetings here, is scheduling links have lots and lots of bells and whistles, lots and lots of ways to kind of customize them to fit your meeting types. But the really powerful thing about scheduling links, the really unique thing about them to Reclaim, is this concept of priority. And this is probably a good segue into showing you this priority screen that I've kind of been bouncing back and forth on. Because Reclaim has a sense of priority, it knows how to make trade-offs. One of the big challenges of calendaring is not that there's so much data to sift through. It's that there's not so much time, there's never enough time to get space for the things that need to be done. And so one of the ways that we're trying to kind of bring more nuance into the calendar is by allowing you to express a priority for everything that's on your schedule. And so I can send a link to someone. You can see all these critical links that I have here. These critical links know how to overbook anything that's lower priority, right? So if I have a smart meeting or a habit or a task that's marked as a lower priority than critical, that priority is going to allow, those meeting times will show as available, even if there's something sitting there that's already marked as busy. I can also go through and actually prioritize events on my calendar. So if I know that there are particular events, like a recurring event here, that's always kind of like secondary to other meetings I want to take, I can change the priority level of that event and kind of, tell Reclaim that it's a lower priority item. What I haven't talked about a ton are smart meetings, and smart meetings you can really think of as habits for multiple people. They operate in much the same way. They're all about recurring sort of meetings that you want to have with people, but just like habits, they're more flexible. So you and multiple other people can express your preferences on when you want meetings to occur. We automatically detect time zones, we automatically detect availability, and then you can add in obviously video conferencing and conference rooms and stuff. And then just like habits, you're giving us sort of a flexible frequency where you want the thing to happen. And Reclaim's going to automatically reschedule it if things come up, if someone RSVPs no, if someone can't make the meeting. So we really try to kind of give you a lot of flexibility around how these meetings get scheduled. In addition to that, you can have smart meetings follow dependencies. You can do the same thing with habits. So if you're like, hey, I only want this meeting to happen after we've done our customer feedback review habit, or after I've or on a different day than this OKR, this team meeting that we have, you can kind of set up little linkages and dependencies that determine how these things get scheduled on your calendar and on your colleagues' calendars. I think that's mostly our time blocking and meetings section of the product. The last couple things I'll just show you since we've got a little bit of extra time. And then, of course, happy to take any remaining questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. First thing I'll show you are hours. We talked a little bit about hours, but I just want to make sure you've got a sense of where to find it. We have a set of default hours. These are like your working, meeting, and personal hours. These are defaults you can configure. They kind of work on everything in Reclaim. And then we've got these custom hours, right? These are hours that are sort of like custom ranges for specific things that you want to make time for. So let's just take these deep work and focus hours as an example. I can choose which things I want this to be an option for. I can be like, hey, I want this to work on tasks and habits. I don't really care about scheduling links and smart meetings because it's all about deep work. I can say what category by default I want these tasks to be in. And these custom hours are then available as things you can sort of schedule your tasks and habits within. You can also from here decide which calendar you want tasks to schedule on for those specific hours. So that's one thing. Just would really recommend like setting those things up to match your patterns. You can always change them or modify them. I already talked about buffers. The last thing I think to mention here is color coding. We automatically color code your calendar based on categories that we detect. By default, we will only do this for your Reclaim events. So if you have not already opted into this for all your events, would highly recommend doing that. You can click this button and do that. And then you can pick which colors you want to have assigned to different categories. One of our most popular feature requests is the ability to create custom categories. That's something we're definitely hoping to do in the future. For now, these categories pretty much align with the core kind of categories that we use in the rest of the product. So team meetings, solo work, personal, travel, external, and one-on-ones. This also matches pretty tightly to our Slack status sync feature, which automatically syncs your Slack status to events on your calendar and lets you set do not disturb and stuff like that. One thing we get asked relatively frequently is why not enough colors? I go into Google Calendar and I see like a bajillion colors here. I can add any color I want. Again, it would be really nice if Google told people this, but they don't. This is what's called a calendar color. That is different from an event color. And you see these event colors have very few options. Event colors are visible to everyone. Calendar colors are visible only to you. And so when we go through and we do our color coding job, we have to color code the events, not the calendar, and therefore we can only offer you so many colors. So there is your lesson on Google's interesting design decisions for the day.
Mini loophole though, if you do want to have one custom color, you can use the calendar color here
Very true. Yes.
and choose
Thank you.
one fun color that you love.
Yes, you can. That's very true. Yes, if you wanted to change your calendar color to be something like I don't know, hot magenta or something, you can do that. And then yes, that will show as an option here that you could use as your one cool color. So yep.
A little bit of fun.
A little bit of fun, not too much.
We have no other questions. Arthur did say 5 and 10-minute break durations would be helpful after tasks and habits. Since the is 50 minutes, it's a bit long. But I think we covered that.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you everyone to joining. We'll follow up with the recording of the webinar too, which will be on YouTube. I appreciate you all for being here. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to the support team in chat or via email. And we will see you in another webinar or down the line on YouTube, anywhere else we run into you. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Andrew, for joining. Bye.
Thanks.